A very good evening to everybody who has taken out the time to join us here today. I'm Oishika Ghosh from the Startup India team at Invest India. As India's startup ecosystem continues its remarkable growth, it's crucial to recognize and further support women entrepreneurs to bring them at the forefront of India's innovation story. We've gathered here today to take our five-part webinar series forward as part of Leaders, a celebration of women in the startup ecosystem. During the week of International Women's Day 2022, we are focusing on the various ways in which the diverse stakeholders and enablers in the startup ecosystem can provide support to entrepreneurs and ensure a sustainable impact. Our session today focuses on women driving innovation through industry startup synergies. We have with us Ms. Kuppulakshmi Krishnamoorthy, who is the global head of the Zoho for Startups program at Zoho. With about 20 years in the workforce, Kuppu has been a part of Zoho's growth story for over a decade, and bridging the gap between business and technology has been her core area of work. She focuses on strategic alliances between Zoho and various startup bodies, such as state governments, incubators, accelerators, and other stakeholders. Kuppu is also a mentor to various startups. Welcome, Kupu, and thank you so much for taking out time for us on a Sunday evening and giving us the opportunity to interact with you and learn from you.
Not at all, Ashika. I see this as part of my responsibility. So Sunday evening is still good, and I'm so glad that there are people taking out the time to join us in this conversation, without which there's no actual meaning to what you and I are doing today. So thank you so much for having me here, and in the next few minutes, I'll try to be as useful as I can.
Absolutely. So, without further ado, we would start with a series of questions that we've prepared. My first question to you would be, as you've already mentioned, that bridging the gap between business and technology is a definitive focus area of your work at Zoho. So, I'd like to know more about what are some recent prominent trends or factors that, according to you, have been contributing to closing this gap.
Okay. So what are some of the factors or trends that I have noticed that bridges this gap between business and technology? You're asking, right?
Yes.
That's a question. Okay. So we launched this Zoho for Startups program around 2016, 2017, around the same time where we were still figuring out how to build policies around startups, or structurally how they are different from other kinds of businesses like the traditional ones we've had so far. Right from your Kirana store to many organizations who are actually MSMEs or small and medium businesses, not that definitely fit into the definition or how we expect startups to scale. From then to now, a few observations we make in terms of how technology has deeply integrated itself as part of businesses. And as one of the few good side effects, I would say, of the pandemic itself has been um, how it's gifted us with a digital workplace. Many of us, as part of a work life integration, we've been thinking about how we can actually figure things out between our personal life and our professional life and make some meaning out of the business we are trying to build, or the innovation or disruption. So I think the gift of the pandemic, one of the very few things that are positive result, has been how much technology adoption has been accelerated by many of the businesses. So much that today, in 3 years down the line, it feels like if you're saying tech startups, it feels like it's a bit redundant. Many of the startup founders are tech savvy themselves, and today you see some of the top 300 startups, say 400 startups in India, are either fintech or education tech, but they're good, and they're also doing good work in the field of health and pharma. So everywhere you see, I think tech is now inseparable. In other words, you really cannot complete the definition of your business without bringing in enough tech. And within the organization itself, a lot of conversations have happened between the otherwise infamous, unpopular IT teams and the various other business segments. So there is a forced conversation that has begun to happen, which have had good results in onboarding a good amount of applications or technology in general that will help business adopt to the future of workspace. And I think India still has some work to do, not really play the catch up game in this, but really work with some more confidence in bridging this gap. So sometimes, how one side of the coin is our how we celebrate our diverse culture, the different languages we speak, and sometimes it also causes a lot of challenges when we have to translate some of the benefits of technology and how it can do some good to you into regional languages, so that when we talk about bridging the gap between business and technology, we have to define what kind of businesses should thrive more in order to have a sustainable future, and where do these conversations happen more and more. How local are we in terms of talking about disruption in general, not necessarily Bangalore or Delhi that is turning out to be the next Silicon Valley in India. I think importance of getting this gap narrower to those regions where language plays a very important culture, how we educate or bring more awareness, how we see the downside of this diversity in India, to have more conversations that has to reach tier 2 and tier 3, so that we can actually bridge the gap. Otherwise, sitting here in metro, I feel that I still am contributing only to a shallow part of the growth, or an easy part of the growth.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And also, even I believe that the pandemic has actually opened a whole new world to a lot of individuals and, startups and corporates, and technology is actually now very much ingrained in the everyday lives of the startups. So, absolutely.
Yeah. And we're
So, my
also
next
looking at
question
the
to
gig
you.
economy, right? I completely forgot to talk about that. So we're looking at so many young generation that believes in backpacking and working on the side. So mental health has been put, in the first and foremost place during this pandemic. There's a lot of freelance workers that are into the picture, that are doing very important work. So the kind where we look at definition of workplace, the definition of economy that arises out of this new definition of workplace that's resulted in the gig economy, I think we can't ignore them, having how technology plays a major role in the growth of any businesses. We can't ignore the contribution by this new generation of workers as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I think a lot of people are now exploring the fact that, they can be doing, they can have multiple sources of income, and they can be doing something on the side, and which was earlier not possible entirely. So this is again a new thing that has, been possible because of the pandemic in a way. So my next question to you would be, since you have been extremely involved in the startup ecosystem of India for quite a few years now, so and it has been growing exponentially. So what are your thoughts about the current scenario, particularly in terms of representation of tech startups as well as women-founded or women-led startups?
Wow. Okay. This is like, it comes with a lot of responsibility. Okay. Like, you have to press rewind to see how much we have traveled into this startup ecosystem in building it. When I say we, it's also Startup India, the Invest India team. I think we just had a chance meet somewhere in 2016, 17, where I tell the story everywhere I go because it's one of the first collaborations we made. I represent Zoho today, this evening, where we have built Zoho for startups from scratch. So looking at how from 2016 to now that we have traveled, um, I think, how the startup ecosystem in India has grown, it is quite exponential. I think when we look at numbers, when startup word was not such a buzzword, somewhere in 2008 to 2010, if you look, from there, where somewhere we had some 500 plus startups, to now we have around anywhere between 35 to 45,000 startups in India alone. And I'm looking at trends in general. I'm looking at inputs from various startup founders that not only talk in Twitter but in real life when you have a conversation on how are we looking at growth? Is it really exponential, or the kind of quality startups that we need? Where exactly the disruption should happen? Personally speaking, I think I come from a non-tech world, and I have a lot of intersection in terms of how I want to define growth or disruption. As a parent looking at the future via a 10-year-old's perspective, as someone who is from outside of technology that still asks a lot of stupid questions to understand how we all are envisioning the future of work, or what exactly are we disrupting. So when we reach for the sky, do we have a ground that is very stable, where we talk about the essentials of how we run a life, socioeconomic equality, equal gender representation. So you have to put a lot of things together in order to properly define whether we have grown exponentially or not. So looking at all of this in the current scenario, um, be it revival of natural resources, how much we have to insist to bring back the focus on sustainability, where we see more such businesses happening in India, including in the field of education, in terms of the quality of food produce that we have, the import export balance that we need to restabilize. How much of manufacturing has to happen within India? We have learned enough lessons during this pandemic on how to be self reliant, how to make in India uh, beyond the mantra that it is, how much we can bring in entrepreneurial minds, and try to create a flat hierarchy around this. Maybe form more committees where we can hear voices from across strata, that even means young representations, talking more about how they envision the future of world. So it's a lot that goes on in my mind on how I want to define growth personally, when I want to run Zoho for startups. But um, yes, the growth has been very good. There's been a lot of policy written around how to structure the growth of startups. What are the benefits that the startups will get, in terms of legal help, in terms of players like us who are from the SaaS world, but we want to come and complete the circle in via good offerings to the startups, so that some of the challenges that are otherwise very trivial for the startups to be successful, these challenges are at least eliminated. This block is removed from their path. In terms of representation of tech startups, it's obvious India is looking very, very good. We saw the list of unicorns, and the soon to be unicorns also. Women founded startups, I know this is always my pet peeve too. There's a lot more conversation that has to happen. um, that's like, one question is not enough for me to talk about it. Culturally, we have to talk so much about why we should have more women founders, not just because we want to have equal representation or we look good on the list. Even today we hear a lot of stories on uh, women founders not getting featured, women investors story not coming out, not being listed where they should be listed. And sometimes we are blamed for not having enough confidence as against our counterparts. So I think in terms of measurement of why we should have equal number of women representation, the focus has to go back on quality. The focus has to go back on where disruption in India is actually needed, so that it's not just the conversation always around your paycheck or around the GDP of a particular state. It's time that we expanded this growth definition and put it back to the basics, like sustainability and having equal representation across all strata. So I don't know, maybe we should look at more specific questions or a day long conversations around what my thoughts are about the current status of women founders, especially.
Absolutely agreed with you. I mean, one question or, even one short conversation on women led startups and the why of women entrepreneurship is not enough. So, actually, that brings me to another question. Pitching and raising funds actually has been noted as a widespread challenge given among all entrepreneurs, but especially women entrepreneurs as well. And there seems to be a structural disparity there. So, I mean, what do you think is at the core of these challenges, and how can women entrepreneurs actually navigate through them?
The scene now actually looks good. From the challenges we faced in the early stages of Indian startup ecosystem, we had a lot of disparity. Um, that kind of provokes you and depresses you at the same time, where we don't understand where to derive answers that feel is justified as answers. Why we don't have women. But if you talk to the investor world out there, sometimes we get answers that are quite shallow, where they say, okay, we don't have women pitching themselves with more confidence. And sometimes this goes back to the kind of feedback that they are also getting when they pitch an idea, the kind of mentorship that is available. I think today the scenario looks very good. We have committees, we have uh, founders and mentors, women who have traveled that path, what it takes to be there. So there is more personalized lessons on failure, on vulnerability, instead of advices on just reading those 60 books written by someone who's not living the life we live every day. The kind of caretakers we have become, the multitaskers we have become during this pandemic. So one cannot have a conversation from a very what do you say, delusional uh, place where we forget how much power we have, but we forget how much responsibility that power brings. My thoughts are all over the place. I'm trying to collect because it kind of gets personal when we don't see equal women representatives, but all around you there are great ideas of disruption. So I think now we have, I work day in, day out with a lot of projects that focuses on women founders, that truly intentionally works on bringing infrastructure so that the pitches are heard, the ideas are validated on time, and there's enough funding given to them in order to accelerate growth at the right time. So the pandemic has played a crucial role in this, where um, I think we've had more serious conversations on how to make this practically possible than having conversations around Women's Day alone. Break the bias is something we have to talk about every day. And when we say, okay, if I have to rate a set of male founders pitching their ideas, and you ask them to rate themselves, they rate themselves as 9 on 10, on 10 on 10. The confidence rate is always higher, they say. But then when are we going to give a pushback to them saying, your quality of idea is not good, as against someone who's rating themselves 6 on 10, honestly? So I think we have to have more conversations every day to solve challenges by the women founders. Sometimes you see it's rooted deeply in culture. We can't help the fact that we are naturally caregivers, we are nurturers, we are biologically responsible for proliferation. So a lot of factors come into place, and let's put the focus back on quality than just the numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was actually really insightful. I also wanted to ask you this because you do mentor and guide a lot of startups, and um, but other than the pitching and raising fund bit, what are some other key challenges that you notice that startups face, and do you feel that any of those challenges are repetitive or recurring? Do you think it comes from a lack of awareness or resources? So, we'd just like to know your thoughts about some common challenges that the startups you mentor or have mentored in the past face.
Yeah, the kind of challenges that we used to face a few years back, say around the time we started working with startups, is very different from the kind of challenges the startups seem to face today, which is a very, very good thing. Some of the startup founders themselves have turned mentors. They take to platforms and various events, they partner with us, and they come forward to share some of the mistakes that they made, so that in a way they're actually forming and nurturing a community. So when I mentor several startups, it's nice to see mentors who take leadership roles, wear vulnerability on their sleeves, and talk about some of the mistakes that the startups don't have to make, forgetting the competition or forgetting how they all are in the same race to make funds, or go into the next round of pitching and growth. It's a good scenario. It's a healthy competition these days that I see, where the mindset itself has changed a lot. And in terms of personal observation, I see there has to be a lot of improvement in design thinking and how we structure either a service or a product around this. So when we work on a proof of concept and converting them into minimum viable product, the aim is not always to get to sort of do a reverse math on, if I do this, will I get my first 50 paying customers? If I do this, will it really look like an MVP where chal jayega, for the next few years till I build on top of that? So I think in terms of design thinking, in terms of usability, we still need a lot of education where naturally women are good at it in terms of 360-degree of thinking and planning. And sometimes the reverse math is not present in the right timing. What I mean to say is, you have to have the foresight of being able to travel to the journey to see how my startup will look 5 years down the line, and you have to have the time for it. When you're expected to be a lean team, when you're expected to have a founding team of 6 to 10 members, when the startup founder is doing multitasking, there's hardly any time left to introspect, to time and again check and put yourself back on track. So second is, uh, I would say, in general, how do you communicate with, within the team, and how do you communicate to the external world? I think the startup founders need to have a very strong persona, have a personal brand. It is not just about the business that you do. We all want to know who you are minus your work as well. What are your ethics? What do you believe in life? How do you take on challenges? We want to know everything about a founder. It's not just about the ethos that you follow in your business anymore. So start talking around just your business, your personal interest, how you live your everyday life, which is not taken very seriously. So communication internally and communication externally, your interpersonal skills and the persona that you build around yourself speaks a lot, speaks volume for your growth. um, I think in general, this is a little bit outside of SaaS and startups space I work. Hiring good talent. A lot of challenges these days have come because the world has opened up. There's job opportunities sitting at where you are, and you can work out of Tel Aviv or you can work out of Estonia. You know how the European Union is working around expanding the whole scope of startups and where you get registered. So the gig economy workers, you travel when you want to, and you work when you want to. They want to put happiness first than this just paycheck. So I think hiring and retaining talent is the one of the most important challenges that the startups are trying to solve, because we have, I think, majority of people who compare one paycheck versus the other, or there's not enough work done by the person applying for the job as to what the startup or an organization has been doing so far. What is this growth strategy looking like for the next 5 years? So if you go back, I think this is also a problem we have to fix in the education system, where um, you have to help students think out of the box. Uniformity in thinking needs to be broken in terms of you respect and do as I say. Teachers should change, for which I think some of us have to go back into teaching part time and help in building good skills around critical thinking, how to be a good team player because you're facing a lot of personalities every day at work, how to build a foresight and present your ideas very confidently. Sometimes when you have an idea that is clearly out of the box, you need a lot of support, you need a lot of courage and self confidence in order to present it. So in order to support that craziness, you need confident people who won't steal your ideas also. So
Yes.
one other funny challenge I think the startups are still facing is profitability, because sometimes enough homework is not being done to see how much competition they already have in the market. This is beyond my scope of work, but sometimes we do get emails clearly stating why that startup is shutting down, and it really breaks our heart. So having good judgment of what will generate more demand, sometimes you need to keep your ears to the ground on what the future trends are. So sometimes it's a long haul. Are you ready for it? That is also a question that we have to answer.
I hope this, our viewers who are entrepreneurs are taking notes because these are some really useful takeaways. And your words about hiring and retaining talent also brings me to my next question. How much importance would you put on the organizational culture at a startup? And what, according to you, are a few things that should be kept in mind to build a culture that is rooted and transparent?
Hmm. So, some of these questions I know you shared with me already, but I'm a strong believer of talking extemporaneously because most of the times um, I come up with honest answers only when I'm not prepared and I speak from the heart. So, might sound very cliched because I work in Zoho, but it is very important to always have a leadership team on the top that always reinstates the focus, and the origin of growth is always having a good culture. We have enough leaders speak about how you take care of your employees so that in order they take care of your customers. So an organizational culture, the ethos that you have around which a business is being built is very, very important. So any startup founder, I think when they write their vision and mission statement, or when the first line of ideas start to sprout, they have to have a very clear organizational culture in place, which means they focus on having equal representation, hiring people across different age groups in order to solve problems of the future or build for the future. Having facilities where today we are talking about not just male and female gender. The world defines more than 100 genders. So let's not have stereotypes and then work on building, on breaking these stereotypes. So in Zoho, I think um, a lot of conversations we had at a very early stage, which helped in accelerating the growth of Zoho, where we are completing 25 years and we have touched about 75 million users across the world, and which means we are working with people in different cultures who speak different languages, who are from different age groups, and who envision the future in a very different way than my generation is probably looking. So I have to have a very strong foothold on an organization that believes in my vision, that believes in my inputs when I take it back and present it to the top leadership, where the hierarchy is there to guide you and mentor you, not necessarily put a disciplinary structure in place saying how can she represent or present an idea where I am here sitting with 50 years of experience. So it's a lot of breaking how traditional hierarchy was there before. And as a startup, you have to have a truly entrepreneurial mindset even in terms of leadership. So I think what to keep in mind is be very self-aware. As much as you give importance to the IQ, give importance to your emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. Be very self-aware so that you can socially be very aware. um, Maintain a good rapport, whether you're talking to a CEO for another company or you're talking to someone who is just starting out, because what goes around comes around, and we really don't believe in giving equal respect to everyone out there. This is something I really want the startup founders to internalize. Why only praise someone after they become famous and then they are sitting in an economy seat in an aircraft? Appreciate simplicity in everyone so that tomorrow when they've become famous, you know you've done the right thing by respecting every human being out there. The third thing I would like to tell the startup founders is there are some things you take very seriously, but as an external observation, someone who observes the growth, I think it's equally important to take time out to put your mental health first. The amount of conversation that goes into helping women build confidence, helping women build representing themselves in pitch fests and everywhere, I think uh, equally men should be allowed to wear vulnerability on their sleeves, to cry when they want to say, okay, I'm not able to go on in the startup race because I'm heading towards a burnout. And how we all can support openly irrespective of our gender and background where we are. So in order to put a organizational culture in place, some of the startups are doing this very beautifully. Instead of feeling the competition, they are even telling you, for example, how to write your ESOP. how to craft a good pitch deck. So this is something that only a founder can do with all authenticity. So instead of feeling the competition or instead of feeling insecure, I think the more they give, the more we all grow together. So some of this has to find its way back into the organizational culture. Don't wait for things to go wrong and then put policies and provisions in place. So have time always to talk to your employees, however big you grow, for which you need to have good hires who can be self disciplined and self motivated and don't have to come knocking at your doors for permissions and to do the right thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. This actually, you have been a microbiologist by education, and you've been at Zoho for the past 12 years. And I just wanted to know, how has your personal journey been like? Because I believe that you joined Zoho as a trainer in communication. So, and now you're leading the Zoho for Startups program. So, how has that journey been for you?
So I want to close my eyes, and there are so many photos and moments and people and feedback and appreciation come into my mind. So this year has been a milestone in so many ways, because um, I'm slowing down consciously to have more conversations with myself. Personally, I feel I'm finding myself in a place that's very confusing and chaotic. Perhaps I've reached a milestone of 40, and that's an existential crisis. It's not easy to think about this journey, um, where it's 20 years almost into workforce and 13th year at Zoho. To talk only about a few milestones is not fair, but that's all the time that we have. I joined as a trainer, you're right, as communication and soft skills, and that was a time Zoho was hiring mostly based on references. So I think I had the good sense of building my network and sincerely keeping in touch with people whom I had met till then in that part of my life, appreciate what they did for me and the kind of lessons I learned. So one of them, who was a part-time trainer, she was moving to Singapore and she passed down this opportunity to me. Otherwise, I don't think Zoho was advertising the want of in-house trainer. So I got this opportunity via her, and then after 4 rounds of interview, I got into Zoho. And sometime down the line, you see this person sitting, standing behind you, looking at what you're doing in the computer, and I'm kind of irked to know who is this person, and not really neatly dressed, and someone who is really simple looking. So this happens to be the CEO, and he asks general questions about who I am and how long has it been since I joined Zoho and what I was doing. So in the process of explaining, some days later we happened to talk about how it's easy to train people on communication, how you do the right kind of presentation, how do you understand culture, and how do you don't make mistakes when you're working across cultures and stuff. So very playfully or challengingly, this was thrown to me saying, why don't you be our end customer, coming from a non technology background? So I'm a microbiologist, and why don't you try picking one of our applications and do a presentation around it to our end customers, do a very basic one. So you have to work on your strength, like storytelling, ask stupid questions and structure your story, and then stand in front of an audience of 100 people who are very good in tech, who are certified partners of Zoho. So I think this was one of the important milestone where I started moving from just training to understanding more product or what Zoho truly stands for, so that I can do my job better. So I think this helped me move more towards an intersection between technology, what it takes to build a good community that serves each other, uplifts each other, and also understand entrepreneurship. Because a lot of times you see startup founders think success lies in talking about the profit you make that quarter. But when they tell their story, it always goes into factors that are intangible, like resilience. You talk about perseverance. You talk about how much vulnerable you were when you were doing the when you were doing your pitch. So how well you tell your story, how you work on your customer delight. So I think looking back, my journey in Zoho, flat hierarchy helped. The freedom and the sense of belonging, where I can approach anyone for any kind of help and I won't be judged for the quality of questions I was asking, that really helped. So when I took up a responsibility of building Zoho for startups from scratch, there are people who were willing to work with me inside and outside to help me understand and navigate this really new space. The leader set aside time to talk to someone like me, where I felt more deserving of what I was doing than having to feel gratitude. It's a combination of both. So this gave me a lot of encouragement and um, the freedom to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, the person whom I'm reporting to told me that, sometimes when people go and do their MBAs, it costs you so much to finish your education. So look at this mistake as you're graduating and you won't repeat this mistake. So this is very rare in an organization where you're forgiven for your mistake and you're equally trusted that you will learn from it and you will make only new mistakes. So these are some of the things that have helped me stay my ground and every day wake up with good energy to face new challenges, because working with startups can truly be exhausting sometimes. So it's good to be in this intersection where I'm able to always focus on the human element of technology and use software and future technology only as a catalyst to empower human growth or to empower the young mind, and stay always on course, not lose track on how the real future of work or the real future of technology should be. So I'll keep speaking and working in this space so that we have equal representation from everywhere. And thanks to you, Startup India, because I always have a good platform to share my viewpoints on such topics.
I'm sure people really appreciate it, definitely. Also, so this is how you pivoted from, non-tech to tech quite organically within Zoho. But what is it that kind of piqued your interest to, work for the startup community?
Can you say the last part of the question again? I think your voice
Sure.
is
So I said
breaking my
that,
network.
this is how you pivoted from non-tech to tech quite organically within Zoho. But what is it that actually piqued your interest to work for the startup community?
Okay, I did not plan on working with the startups. Like there was no such moment where I woke up one day and I thought I will work for the startups. So when you are part of several meetings within the organization, how Zoho was ready with this offering called Zoho One, and I was starting to represent Zoho in various events where conversations were happening a lot around startups. I thought in both stages, where I was and where the startup ecosystem in India was, I think we both were beginning at the same time. We were starting off in that direction. So I thought there's going to be a lot of time and opportunity available for me to sit and think and do the right thing. I don't have to start being productive from day one. So at the same time, I had also represented multiple products from Zoho. So I knew some parts of how a feature will really help in someone who is just starting off or has a very lean team and has to do multitasking, where time management, investing in the right kind of software was very important. So I could say this story where I could easily connect between a startup founder story and what Zoho was trying to do. So when you find that in an intersection, and Zoho was not yet doing anything specifically for startups, all I had to do was raise my hand, put a proper idea in place, and this is how I intend to work in this space, and go to my boss. So that's how it happened. So it was not like a eureka moment or something spiritual that happened, but looking back, it looked like, okay, it had to happen this way. You connect the dots and the story is there.
So it happened like slowly and organically.
Yes.
Yeah. So we also, quite often see that whatever support corporates and the wider industry in general give to startups in a lot of ways, whether it is through specialized products or providing grants. It helps startups a lot. So, what are your thoughts about strengthening these industry startups, synergies, or partnerships?
Yeah, that's a good question. See, I see the two sides of this one, the set of people who are coming together to make sure that a startup or any business that is just starting off, there is good structure in place. There is always a direction that, I see myself as this traveler entering into a new kingdom. So it'll be nice to have answers where I don't know how to even ask the question. So as against what we had in 2008 or 2016, a lot of people have come together to put a structure in place. So some of the areas where I don't know what I don't know for a business, that part has been very well taken care of. All they have to do is ask for help, tell people if they are stuck somewhere. um, so I see that both the government's initiative or the state government's initiative, or when a new incubator is coming into place, there's enough care that is taken on having infrastructure in terms of funding arrangements or mentoring arrangements, or enough supplements in order to get day-to-day functions done. However, I see that based on the nature of the startup, how long it's going to take for them to move from an idea stage into a proper functioning stage or a profitable stage, I see that the startups still need a lot of help. Sometimes it's not the fault of the structure or neither the fault of the startups, but many of our programs, you see, we first started out, of course, focusing on lead generation. Even Zoho for startups, we might say in the marketing terms, saying we want to give back to the startup community. We were once a startup, we know the challenges we faced, but the idea here is to have a lot of startups use Zoho, right? We can't run away from that truth. So somewhere we are finding a mid ground to tell them, look, we are also here to run our business, and at the same time we also want to help you startups start off on a good foot, not having to spend much of your time, energy and funds, and disappear because of these early challenges. So I think we are in a good place. We need to look at quality disruptions than having to look at more discounts in place or more offerings in place. I think there needs to be more structure on um, why I am coming up with this idea that already has 50 different businesses doing it. What is my strategy that is different, that gives me an edge, the scope of scalability? So when we have free courses on startups and all of that, I think today the responsibility has also shifted more into the hands of founders, to do businesses that are really either disruptive or something that they already know will end up in profitability or help them sustain in this field for a long term. Two ways to do it, the stories that we have looked at: the one offering that you do and you do it really well, or you have to bring in multiple offerings where, in SaaS you see a lot of consolidation is happening, where we all are looking at one place to have offerings for the startup. So you have to be very clear, and slowly the responsibility is shifting on a business that is being born. So we have to question more on that. And I think the governments and everyone that is enablers of these businesses, we all are having active conversations day in and day out. So there'll be more improvements every day. I'm very positive about that.
Absolutely. So on the same lines, because you work so closely with all these different diverse stakeholders in the startup ecosystem, and you've kind of got a bird's eye view of what goes on. So what do you think can be done differently by stakeholders to like, provide further support to women entrepreneurs in particular? And this is a very open-ended question. If there are any specific changes or initiatives that you would like to see.
Some of the notes I have been gathering over time, I keep collecting them, put a structure to it, and I keep passing on the notes to various people who are standing at the forefront to really accelerate women founders. So at the moment, I don't have anything to contribute where I can say, okay, this is something we can do better. but have more conversations. I would like to be part of that table where every day we are trying to have conversations with women who are doing good in their businesses in order to help them accelerate. So we, like I said today, I know off the top of my head, I know at least 10 different initiatives that are focusing on getting proper funds for women, to have the right platform of mentorship, or within the community itself, even if you are a small business owner, how we can make software available for these people, or the right kind of tools, help you in translate your language of offering, so that you can scale your business across the globe. I think the scene is looking really, really good. I like I said, we have to focus more on quality, not just on numbers, if we are
Yes.
looking at not having enough women founders. But um, we see, look at the kind of work that some of the top startup founders are doing, right from yatra.com to how we have news around what Kalari Capital is doing. Mani Kola is one of the leaders I admire. Now we have Falguni Naik from Nika. So there are enough disruptions happening, and I'm very happy that the kind of work that these women do are from diverse fields. And some of these women are really busy multitasking. Perhaps there's not enough time for even interview or share their story. One of them is Hemlata from Coimbatore, right? The kind of work that she's been doing in electric vehicle space is outstanding, but we don't see her enough on social media. So we have to find and bring out their stories, so that more women feel motivated and define their own way of sustaining their business. I don't have to have really 50 different geographic locations or a profitability year on year that's impressive for others. But in terms of usability, in terms of long term sustainability, and helping the earth be more greener for the future, all of this we still need. We don't really have to celebrate funding in terms of understanding how successful we are. So, more stories from women founders too.
Completely agree about bringing in more stories, because having good community role models actually motivates a lot of people. And uh, I really hope that that part actually comes to the forefront more often. Kupu, one final question for you. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs, since leaders this year, the celebration of the International Women's Day by Startup India focuses on aspiring entrepreneurs? People who have ideas or who have startups that are in the ideation or validation stage, do you have any specific areas of support that you feel that early stage startups can focus more on?
This advice comes with a disclaimer. Okay, I'm not really part of a startup world, neither have I been in a position of a founder or having traveled this. So I say this with utmost caution and humility, at the same time, out of the experience that I have gained over the years as a woman in tech, or look at me as someone who's been parenting a really active child. Or if you want to take this advice as someone who's been 20 years into the workforce, even if it doesn't make sense today, I hope someday it rings a bell, and you're able to relate to what I am saying today. So I say this in support of the entrepreneurs, and advise as an observer. I see that, um, I'm going to rephrase this so that it doesn't sound very advicey. Give me a second. Um, I would like for the startups, or any person who is multitasking, running a business, to not take themselves very seriously, because the world is too busy to remember them. And this very fact that someday you're going to be forgotten should free you than cause pain in you. So we all are this tiny specks in the universe. And however big our innovations are, someday we are going to be forgotten. And this should liberate us in order to make us more confident. And we should work on being more responsible and fearless. Sometimes, in the process of being confident and fearless, We forget the responsibility side and slightly become reckless. But no, be on track, have confidence and faith in yourself, ask for help. Do not be afraid to ask silly questions, and don't take yourself too seriously. This pandemic, if it had taught us anything, it is that.
Thank you for that, Kupu. I think that is such a wonderful advice. I mean, not just for startups, but even, for people in general. It's a good advice to not take ourselves that seriously. Um, yeah, so thank you so much, Kupu, for taking out the time for this session. And of course, also to the viewers who had joined us today. It was an absolute pleasure and also really inspiring to know about your journey and your thoughts on women entrepreneurs and, of course, the overall startup and innovation landscape in the country. And I'm positive that our viewers have some great takeaways from this. I know I do for sure. So, a big, big thank you to you once again.
Thank you, Ashika. I would love to hear some feedback on what I could have done better, or any questions that I have still left unanswered. And I'm going to go back to look at my notes and send you those notes on my observations from the startup ecosystem, especially having more women leadership. I will send them across to you, and let's see if we can share it with everyone in a useful format. And thank you on behalf of all of us at Zoho for always having us as part of your story. So I really mean it. It means a lot for a company that is growing, and we are trying to have more conversations with the startups. This means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is all ours. Thank you. So, have a great week and take care.
You too, Ashika. Thank you, and thank you, everyone.